July 1972, a sleepy Mississippi River town in eastern Missouri suddenly found itself at the center of one of America's strangest monster panics. Children came running out of the woods, claiming something enormous had chased them. Something covered in shaggy hair, something with glowing orange eyes, something that smelled so foul adults could detect it long after it disappeared. Within days, armed posses searched the forest, television news crews descended on the town, national newspapers picked up the story, and a creature known simply as MoMo, the Missouri Monster. Was it an undiscovered primate? A case of mass hysteria, a prank that spiraled out of control? Or did the woods surrounding the Mississippi hide something no one could explain? Tonight, we're opening the Midwest Shadow Files on the story of MoMo. Hello, welcome back to Midwest Shadow Files. I'm Dan, your host and your Midwest Shadow Stories storyteller. And tonight we're traveling into northeastern Missouri to the small town of Louisiana. Not Louisiana, the state, but Louisiana, Missouri. Quiet streets, river bluffs, thick forest, and enough secluded woodland that if something wanted to stay hidden, it probably could. July 11th, 1972, the summer had been hot. The woods surrounding Star Hill were thick with brush. 8 children were playing near the edge of the forest, and the oldest was around 15, the youngest only a few years younger. At first, nothing seemed unusual until something moved. According to the children, a massive figure stepped from behind the trees. 7, maybe 8 feet tall, covered head to toe in dark hair. Broad shoulders, long arms, a head that seemed to blend directly into its body with almost no visible neck. And then, the smell. One witness later described it as unbearable, like rotting garbage mixed with wet animal. And the children didn't wait around to investigate. They ran, screaming, terrified. Adults initially assumed the kids had imagined the entire thing, until more reports started coming in. Local newspapers quickly picked up the story, and within days, the creature had a nickname, MoMo, short for Missouri Monster. Descriptions remained surprisingly consistent. It was 7 feet tall, hairy, powerfully built, with orange or reddish glowing eyes, a wide face, long arms, and of course, an overpowering odor. Some witnesses even claimed it carried a dead dog under one arm. Others insisted it whistled before appearing. One family reported strange noises around their property. Another claimed rocks had been thrown from the woods. Every new sighting seemed to add another layer to the legend. But were these independent encounters, or were people beginning to see what they expected to see? That's one of the central questions investigators will debate tonight. The story spread like wildfire, and soon the sheriff's office was flooded with phone calls. Hunters entered the woods carrying rifles. Search parties formed. Residents walked outside after dark with flashlights. And children were told to stay indoors. Some families refused to let their kids play near the woods at all, and television crews arrived. National newspapers began reporting on Missouri's newest monster. The tiny town became famous almost overnight. It's a pattern we've seen before. Once a community begins talking about a mysterious creature, every strange noise, every broken branch, every shadow between the trees suddenly feels connected. Psychologists call this expectation bias. Cryptozoologists call it evidence. And the truth may lie somewhere between the two. Unlike many monster stories, MoMo reportedly left behind something investigators could actually examine: footprints. Some witnesses claimed enormous tracks were discovered in muddy areas. Others reported broken vegetation, flattened grass, tree damage. Unfortunately, most of the evidence wasn't preserved using modern forensic methods. Plaster casts were either never made or were poorly documented. Pictures were limited. Measurements varied depending on who was telling the story. That inconsistency would haunt the case for decades. Without reliable physical evidence, researchers had to rely primarily on witness testimony and memory, especially decades of old memory. And of course, this can be surprisingly unreliable. As reports spread, many immediately connected MoMo to another legendary creature, Bigfoot. After all, the similarities were impossible to ignore. It was large, hairy, covered, powerful, human-like, living in remote forests, but there were differences too. MoMo's smell was mentioned far more frequently. Its face was often described as wider or broader. Its reported behavior seemed bolder than many Bigfoot encounters. Instead of avoiding people, MoMo allegedly approached homes. Some researchers believed regional Bigfoot reports simply evolve unique local characteristics. Others argue MoMo represented an entirely different phenomena, or perhaps an entirely different misunderstanding. Not everyone believed a monster was roaming Missouri. Some investigators proposed escaped circus animals. Others suggested a large black bear. Though black bears are uncommon in that part of Missouri today, they were even rarer in the early 1970s. A bear standing briefly on its hind legs, viewed from a distance by frightened children, could certainly appear much larger than it really was. But another explanation? A prank. Several local teenagers admitted years later that they had enjoyed frightening younger children during the MoMo craze. Some accounts even describe homemade costumes. Could every sighting be explained that way? Probably not. Could some? Almost certainly. One fascinating aspect of the MoMo story isn't whether the creature existed, it's how quickly an entire community became caught up in the mystery. Within weeks, businesses embraced the monster. Souvenirs appeared, cartoons, stories. Visitors drove in hoping for a glimpse. MoMo transformed from a frightening unknown into a local folklore. This isn't unusual. Communities across America often adopt strange legends as part of their identity. Take in Point Pleasant has the Mothman. Wisconsin has the Beast of Bray Road. Minnesota has the Wendigo legends. And of course, now as we're telling this story, Missouri has MoMo. Sometimes the legend becomes more important than solving the mystery. More on the actual stories of MoMo right after this. Hey, Dan here with Midwest Shadow Files. I want to thank you really quick for following along. If you haven't had a chance and you like this podcast, consider following along. I'd love to hear from you as well. You can always reach out to me if you have any stories that you'd like to share, any thoughts, any comments. You can reach me at midwestshadowfiles@gmail.com. That's midwestshadowfiles@gmail.com. Just want to take a moment to tell you a little bit about what we have coming down the road on our next episode, which will drop on Wednesday. We're going to go a little bit further with the last episode that we shared last week, which was the ghost stories surrounding some of the colleges and universities in Iowa. And one of those in particular was Iowa State University, which is considered one of the top 5, or at least ranks 5th, in terms of the most haunted campuses in the Midwest. For that reason, and for that reason only, we really feel that there is a lot more stories to tell about Iowa State. So on Wednesday, we will share the ghost stories of Iowa State University. So I hope that you tune in and follow along. And again, of course, as we tell more and more stories to come, for now, let's get back to the story of MoMo. Okay, for now, let's break down some of these stories that happened in and around 1972. July 11th, 1972. This is the Doris Harrison account. And this is really the sighting that started it all. This is the most famous, credible account because it came from multiple members of one family. 15-year-old Doris Harrison was inside her family's home near Star Hill when she heard her younger brothers screaming outside. Looking out the bathroom window, she said she saw a large, dark, hairy creature standing near the edge of the woods. And according to Doris, it stood around 7 feet tall, had shaggy dark hair, appeared to be carrying what looked like a dead dog under one arm, and gave off a horrible smell that drifted through the open window. This single encounter triggered a media frenzy. Now let's hear the second story that is tied with this. Terry and Wiley Harrison. Doris's younger brothers had actually seen the creature first. 8-year-old Terry reported and ran into the house yelling that there was a big hairy thing with a dog under its arm. The boys were visibly terrified, and their father believed they had seen something, even if he wasn't certain what it was. Doris's father, Edgar Harrison, immediately gathered neighbors to search the woods. And of course, they found trampled vegetation, strange odors, disturbed ground, but no creature. A few days later, Edgar himself reported hearing growls around Star Hill and smelling the same foul odors others had described. And one of the lesser known but eerie reports comes from Ellis Minor. Late one evening, his dogs began barking outside. Thinking that another dog had wandered onto the property, he grabbed a flashlight. Instead, he claimed that the beam illuminated a tall, black, hairy figure standing about 20 feet away before it turned and ran into the darkness. That story became one of the most dramatic eyewitness accounts reported after the Harrison incident. And then several days after the Harrison encounter, 2 men near Noyes Creek reported seeing a tall, hairy figure moving through the woods. They also described hearing strange howling shortly afterward. Again, nothing was recovered during these searches. And then in early 1972, in August, another family claimed they heard high-pitched screams during the night. This, of course, was on the Suda farm. The next morning, they reported that they found several large footprints in a garden, and at least one plaster cast was said to have been made. Unfortunately, that evidence has never been conclusively verified. And the most interesting account isn't a sighting. It's the detail that fascinates historians, that Police Chief Shelby Ward became worried enough about armed citizens that he organized a coordinated search. His concern wasn't necessarily that MoMo was real. It was that dozens of excited residents carrying rifles into dense woods might accidentally shoot each other. 20 or more volunteers searched Star Hill, finding disturbed ground and old dog graves, but never really the creature itself. And that detail helps illustrate just how seriously the town took the reports. More than 50 years later, no definitive answer exists. There are possibilities. Perhaps frightened children genuinely encountered an unfamiliar animal. Perhaps several unrelated events merged into one larger story. And perhaps local pranksters unintentionally fueled a monster panic. Or perhaps something unknown briefly stepped into view before disappearing forever. History reminds us that eyewitness testimony is both valuable and it's flawed. People can honestly report extraordinary experiences without arriving at the correct conclusion. That doesn't make them liars. It just makes them human. MoMo was an interesting story to research. It reminded me of another story in Iowa. I did a couple other Iowa Bigfoot stories. You can go ahead and give those a listen as well, but the Log Ridge Monster and the Odison Bigfoot sighting. What's interesting on these accounts, especially the Odison Bigfoot, is that today there is a back and forth elaboration on the subject, that the Bigfoot sightings were an elaborate hoax. Stories came out that the Bigfoot sightings that occurred, much like MoMo, was the sightings were being this big hairy man-like ape-like creature standing at the edge of the woods, staring at people through windows, and the smell was often attributed to the beast, plus the red or orange glowing eyes. With the Odison Bigfoot sighting, much like Louisiana, Missouri, a huge posse and hunting party was put together to hunt down the creature. It alarmed local law enforcement so much that they had to shut most of the hunting parties down in fear of someone being shot, injured, or killed, which sounds quite a lot like MoMo. It seemed to bear similarities because the same things happened in Missouri. Years later, stories began to emerge that it was a joke, that a local man in the area dressed in an ape suit. But the other side, believers, disagree that it was just a way to explain away something not understood and a creature that they say most definitely was Bigfoot. In the case of MoMo, what was truly fascinating was that the sightings didn't just stop after the children's encounter, and that others also came forward to tell their stories about seeing the creature, but keeping quiet about it. Some heard growls. Some heard cries or screams. And then you had encounters that happened to well-respected people in the Louisiana community, like Richard Allen Murray, who had served as the town's fire chief and sat on the town's city council. He reported that while he was driving along a small creek that runs through the middle of town, that he saw something moving in the woods. When his headlights shined upon the creature, it quickly ran away and disappeared, and he said, "I was amazed to see something. I thought it was all nonsense, but then I saw something." And then stories came out about earlier sightings, like the story of two women from St. Louis who stopped to have a picnic near Star Hill. They reported seeing a hairy ape-man creature come upon them, which scared them away, and it stopped and ate their sandwiches that they left behind. If you have never had the opportunity to check out the Bigfoot Research Organization, better known as the BFRO, you can read other accounts of people calling in and reporting sightings of possible Bigfoots all around the country. You can track it by region. Fascinating enough, I thought I would check out Missouri and see if I can find any reports. And interesting enough, Missouri as a whole seemed to rank as one of the hot spots for Bigfoot sightings around the country. Which makes sense in a lot of ways. They have plenty of spots that Bigfoot researchers could consider habitat for cryptids like MoMo. And MoMo would certainly have plenty of woods, a water resource around some of the rivers, including the Mississippi, not to mention anything that's over in the Ozark country. Easily over 166 reported sightings on the site alone for Missouri, not including any sightings not reported. And Pike County, where Louisiana is located, had 5 reports from 1991 through 2004 alone. And what's important to note is the BFRO rating system. When investigating Bigfoot sighting reports, they rank the reports from Class A, B, and C. Class A is a high certainty sighting. They typically involve clear visual observations at close range where witnesses can rule out misidentification. For example, if it's a bear. Class B is typically a distant sighting or poor lighting, and then Class C is from a second-hand report, more like a campfire story passed down, like a game of telephone where facts can get mixed up and lore can start taking shape from the report. On these reports, they range from A or B. Beyond the sightings occurring in the early 70s, there's another story shared from a witness from 1991. I was camping with a friend in early spring. There was a storm coming in and all the animals were stirred up. We almost hit several deer that were crossing the road. One deer jumped out and almost landed on the hood of my Jeep. We got to the campsite and I got an ATV to gather firewood. I was heading to the back of the farm and there was an awful smell. I looked to my left and in the creek I saw a creature that looked like a large ape or bear. It looked right into my eyes. I couldn't move. We stared at each other for what seemed like forever, but it was probably about 30 seconds. Then it turned its head, and from a squatting position, it jumped about 8 feet up the bank and ran in the other direction. I drove back to the campsite after I calmed down, and we both grabbed 2 guns each and went back to where I saw the creature. When we arrived at the spot, it was getting dark, and we didn't want to stay around after dark. We returned to where I saw the creature in the morning and searched for footprints. But the creeks were flooded from the storm, and we found no evidence. And this was just one of the stories. What was fascinating to me on this, it was about 5 miles from Louisiana. Could the campers have run into MoMo? And today, the forest surrounding Louisiana, Missouri still stands. The Mississippi River still flows quietly past the bluffs, and every now and then, someone claims they've seen something unusual moving between the trees. Enough to keep the legend alive. Whether MoMo was a misunderstood animal, or just a cultural phenomena, or one of Midwest's greatest unsolved mysteries, its story continues to capture imaginations more than half a century later. Because sometimes the most enduring monsters aren't the ones we prove that exist, they're the ones that leave just enough mystery to keep us wondering. So, what do you think with all of this? Was MoMo simply the product of fear and rumor? Was he a prank? Or was he a Missouri cousin of Bigfoot? Or something stranger still? Let us know your theory. I'd love to hear from you. You can drop it in the comments below. You can also reach me at midwestshadowfiles@gmail.com, midwestshadowfiles@gmail.com. I'd love to hear what you think on this. And of course, if you enjoyed tonight's investigation, consider following Midwest Shadow Files wherever you get your podcast. Leave a review, share this episode with someone who loves cryptids, folklore, unsolved mysteries, and of course, until next time, stay curious and skeptical. If you're hiking in the woods around Louisiana, Missouri, pay attention to what's watching from the tree line. This episode was written, recorded, and produced by me, myself, and I. I'm Dan, your host and your Midwest Shadow Files storyteller, and this is Midwest Shadow Files.